Wonderful. Thank you very much for the introduction. And yeah, I'm just going to do that. So I'm here to talk about lobbying and graphs. And what I will talk about specifically is how a little bit about lobbying 101 for those viewers who don't come from the industry. And then I'm going to talk about how graphs and graph databases can actually improve transparency and also the effectiveness of lobbying and the role that Neo4j can play here. So this talk is more a little bit of a showcase how we can apply graphs and graph analysis to a new industry or issue that's usually not using graph databases so far. But before we dive into the graph part, let's talk about lobbying. I think that for most of you, especially if you don't come from a political background, when I say lobbying, you think about something like this. Big business giving money to politicians who make favorable laws that make lots of money for big business. And while, yes, certainly there have been quite a few scandals around something like this, the reality of lobbying is more mundane. It's a lot more of a craft than actually a house of cards. It's about understanding the issues, so what is actually being debated. It's about understanding the decision-making procedures, so how do we come to a decision, and obviously the people who make these decisions and who try to influence these decisions. If you've ever done an internal project at your organization, this is also the questions that you should answer at the start to actually have a successful project. Lobbyists use that understanding to actually craft good arguments for their interests, whether they're their own or their companies or their industries, and try to communicate them effectively to stakeholders. So if it's all good, why do we talk about it? Because obviously lobbying affects our lives at a very personal level, because lobbying shapes regulation, and regulation affects our life choices. It affects what products we can find in a local supermarket. So, it is, has a very profound effect on our lives. And therefore, there is a high level of scrutiny, because obviously the impression is that lobbyists try to sway politicians away from the public interest towards their special interests. And that is obviously true because they represent their own interests, but usually democracies have procedures and steps taken place that lead to some kind of compromise that should make everybody unhappy. Just kidding. But it should serve to preserve actually the public interest. But since that's not always the case, there is a high level of scrutiny, and rightly so. So one thing that societies actually have done is increase transparency into the lobbying process. So at least if something's going wrong, we can actually find out about it. And one key measure, they have implemented are lobby registers. As the name says, it's a register where people who lobby politicians or administrations have to register themselves, say who they are, what they're interested in, what they're lobbying for, and usually provide some kind of information on the resources they are actually using. So transparency is kind of the key to actually have social acceptance for lobbying, which in turn is also kind of key of having functional democracies. So having more transparency in lobbying is really important. But now I talked a lot about transparency, so I'm just going to quickly tell you who I am. I'm Julian. I work for the Bernstein Group, which is a group of consultancies. So actually, I come from the industry. If you're interested who we are and who our clients are, I put up the QR code of our lobby register entry. If you want to connect with me after the talk, feel free to do so on LinkedIn. I have been doing graph analytics for about 10 years. I have 2 published papers on that, actually using open source data, transforming it into a graph to get a better insight into the matter at hand. And I've previously talked at Graph Connect 2018 how we can use graphs to fight money laundering. But today, I want to talk about lobby registers, and specifically the German Federal Lobby Register. It's relatively new. It came into force in 2022. So a little late to the party, though in this case, it might not be a bad thing, because I think it uses a lot of lessons learned from other registries. and actually did a really good job at implementing it. So we have very good search capabilities. There's lots of information in there. And for us, most importantly, it provides machine-readable data. I think Alex mentioned that it came to force recently. That's, as I said, it came to force in 2022. But just last week, there was regulation passed that will increase further the transparency requirements of anybody registered in there. So on the left side, you see what a typical entry looks like. It's one of our companies. And you find some general information in there. You find a list of our employees who do the lobbying. You find our client list. You find the memberships we have. And also, if you would receive donations, the list of donators, at least within certain limits. This is great, but it's also a lot of information. I think some of the insights that this registry tries to provide actually gets lost within it. And graphs are a way we can show kind of a second layer in this lobby register that gives us some deeper insight about structures of lobbying and who actually lobbies for what. Because we can transform this data and then kind of see who actually is connected to whom. If you want to look at which organizations we're members in, you can have to search for them one by one, and then you would have also to search for one by one for all their members, which is just really a lot of work. And mentally, I think you will check out of the first 5 or 10 entries. So graphs are an easy way to actually remedy that and show which kind of environment a lobbyist actually works in, because that is important since if you're a member of maybe an association, you will share information with other members. If you share common goals, you will coordinate with them maybe. And that kind of gives you a more complete and more transparent picture of actually who a lobbyist is. You can also ask more complex questions, which I'll hopefully show in a couple of minutes. In terms of what can graph databases bring to this, they're actually really great at obviously integrating the data, make the data management really easy. The lobby register gets updated daily, so there's just a lot of new data coming in. And they also make it really easy to extend that data with other data sources, which I will show as well. And lastly, they also just offer a lot better performance than if you just use files or any other kind of data saving format. And specifically, Neo4j actually provides us some incredible tooling. If you look at the Graph Data Science package with its ability to, for instance, project graphs, create virtual graphs, this is something really usable. For instance, what we see here on the right side is actually the lobby register. It's all the lobbyists connected by their membership relationships. And one way to transform that would actually be to kind of create a co-occurrence graph to understand which members are actually connected to whom by their relationships, which is something you can easily do with a graph projection. And lastly, while Cypher is really fun, something like a front end like Neo4j and Blue makes just exploratory analysis really easy, as I will hopefully show you in a minute. And I think the question I picked today is who's interested in nuclear power? I'm talking about the energy kind, not the bomb kind. Because at least if you know a little bit about German politics in recent years, there was a big energy crisis. Traditionally, Germany used a lot of gas-powered power plants, and more specifically powered by Russian gas, which was discontinued after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. At the same time, we were phasing out our nuclear power plants in favor of renewable energies. And there was a lot of debate around whether we should extend their lifetimes and so on. I'm not going to dive into what is right and what is wrong. I'm just going to say how we can get some insight into this using actually graph technology. Now, what you see here is Neo4j Bloom, and which is connected to my Lobbygraph. And I'm just going to quickly search for nuclear power. So you can, this is basically something like a topic node that is in there. And I can just expand the network to say, I want to know everybody who has an interest in that issue. It's about 164 lobbyists, which pop out. I'm just going to quickly actually dismiss the topic node. And what I can do now is I can just, mark these nodes and do something that's called reveal relationships. Maybe misclicked. Give me one more second. Yeah, and I'm just going to reveal all relationships. And just right away, what we see is that there are a lot of lobbyists that are not connected to other lobbyists that are interested in the topic. But we do see actually two clusters of lobbyists that are densely connected. And just by looking at them, we can actually understand a lot about these clusters. One thing is what they are actually made up. I'm just going to draw, I think, the one cluster a little bit over here, because otherwise you might mistake it for a connected cluster. And the coloring basically shows what kind of entity this lobbyist is. So we have something like this violet color. These are companies. You can see Transnet, which is an energy provider, NBW, it's the same. So we have this cluster basically is a lot of actually the companies from that industry. The orange nodes are lobbyists, they're consultancies, so lobbyists for hire. You see OITOP here, and something that's interesting, for instance, is that you see that OITOP actually has a lot of client relationship with other lobbyists. So basically OITOP is outsourcing some of the lobbying work to these lobbyists, and apparently they do so in the field of nuclear power. So this is basically, I think, the industry cluster, and the slight brown colors, sorry for the coloring, are actually the NGOs. So you see something that is very nature related. Over here, ecological NGOs that are also connected via memberships within themselves. So while obviously if you're from the industry, you probably could tell me a lot of these relationships. If you're not, this is just a very quick insight on how those people advocating in the field of nuclear power, what kind of structures are there, who might be the more important lobbyists. And you can continue to obviously investigate if you would want to. If you take like an NGO here, you can just mark it and maybe see what other members it has, what interests it's also lobbying for, and so on. So a real easy way to get a lot of context that you would definitely not get from just looking at the registry page. Now, I talked about the extending of data, and that is something I also did, and it's using a data set from an NGO called Parliament Watch. And basically what they did is collect a lot of data on, basically side jobs. So any kind of relationship, side job a member of the Bundestag has that in some way pays the money. And this is something I just incorporated because I could connect them relatively easily to lobbyists. And something that Bloom allows me to do is just say, okay, I have nodes of type member of the Bundestag. I want to know they have side jobs, and I want to have particularly know whether they have side jobs with lobbyists. I can just query that, and I get a big list back. Again, we see that it's not a network that's not definitely connected, but we have a big cluster of organizations, and the gray nodes are the Bundestag that are in the middle. Gray because they're not really our focus here. But something we can do to understand this network better, for instance, is use the Graph Data Science package. Just run something simple like a degree centrality algorithm, size the nodes based on that. And what we quickly see are those nodes, the bigger they are, the more side jobs or connection with politicians they have. And we can quickly see that there are quite a few that kind of stand out. Some of them are, there's nothing surprising about this. Just let me quickly look. Something like Deutsche Stiftung für Verbraucherschutz is actually an organization, I think, that was created by the Bundestag. So they usually send some members to the board, and I think those members get a small allowance. But obviously, you can also look at other nodes that are private sector, and that might just have other interests at heart. So with extending this data set, we can quickly not only see what lobbyists are interested in, but also which members of the Bundestag they have a special connection with because they pay them some kind of money, or they pay for trips, or anything like that. Lastly, something that is also really helpful is that we can actually use a graph database to kind of predict which lobbyists are interested in which legislative initiatives. Because the Bundestag has another API, which kind of covers a whole legislative process. And there's basically, each process is categorized in keywords, or I call them fields of interest. And they mirror the fields of interest that lobbyists have to register when they go into the registry. So I can combine these two data sets, and I can then use something that's called topological link prediction to actually connect lobbyists to legislative procedures. And basically this kind of link prediction uses the neighborhood, the graph neighborhood of these fields. So I can see that lobbyists who have a lot of fields of interest in common with the legislative procedure are more likely to be interested in that legislative procedures than those who have not. You can use a variety of algorithms to that. I use academic ADA, which kind of covers or kind of gives nodes or fields of interest that have a lower occurrence, a higher weight, which obviously makes sense because the more specialized node or field of interest is, the more relevant it usually is. And while you would usually do something like this in a graph data, like within the database, you create a database and not use Bloom for something like that, just for the show today. I will show you, I can just have a Cypher query I pre-entered that is predict top stakeholders. I want a top 10 stakeholders for a certain legislative process, and I choose a law that's actually a whistleblowing law. So, being in the whole context of transparency, or it's the law implementing a whistleblowing regulation passed down by the EU. And what I just quickly get, I have the law over here, or the initiative for that law, and I have the top 10 stakeholders based on their fields of interest. Again, if you're from the industry, that can be helpful, but usually you should know these stakeholders. But if you're not, if you're a citizen, you're interested who's actually, maybe lobbying a certain law, then this is a very quick way to get your top 10 or top 50 stakeholders, so you can, kind of continue looking at that. And as I said, it's a graph database, so I can, if I want to, I can just click and look who are they giving side jobs to, where they are members, who works for them, and what other interests they actually pursue. So I think this shows just how valuable graph databases can be in the field of lobbying, creating transparency for the public, but also, obviously, if you're in the field, can make your work a lot more effective. I thank you very much for your attention. I've slightly overdrawn the time limit. If you want, feel free to reach out. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If you are looking for any kind of collaboration, reach out as well. If you should by accident look for any advocacy work or lobbying work, feel also free to reach out. Bernstein Group does provide those services. There is my email, there is my LinkedIn. Thank you very much for your attention.